Welcome back. Today I'm going to give you an overview of part one. So the part one is the first 11 chapters of To Kill a Mockingbird. It really is it does a few things. One is the introduction to Macomb. Macomb is a tired old town in the 1930s. It's poor. Its economy is based mostly on agriculture. It's a town that comes together for disasters such as a fire and yet divides itself over issues of race. The setting, of course, is Macomb, Alabama, the time, the 1930s. You also have an introduction to, in part one, all the major characters. You have Atticus Finch, Jim, Scout, Uncle Jack, Aunt Alexandra, all the Finch relatives. You have Calpurnia, who is the cook, member of the household. You have the neighbors, Boo Radley, Miss Maudie, Mr. Avery, Stephanie Crawford, Mrs. Henry Lafayette Du Bois. You also have Walter Cunningham and the Cunningham clan and the Yules. And you have Heck Tate, the sheriff, and Judge Taylor. So you have all these wonderful characters that have been introduced. Some of them are quite different. Some of them are unique. Then you have these major themes. There's many, but three really important ones that I've been talking about. The themes: the nature of prejudice, and you can see this in the prejudice against those who are different, such as Boo Radley. You could see prejudice against girls, particularly Scout, and the way girls are supposed to be. They're supposed to wear dresses, and this is also seen in Aunt Alexandra. The old. Atticus can't do anything because he's nearly 50. And of course, you have those who are of different colors, different races. And so racism all this has been seen in part one. You also have the meaning of duty. And this is seen mostly through Atticus. Atticus's duty towards his family, Scout and Jim. Atticus's duty towards those in the neighborhood, the community, such as his needing to shoot the mad dog, even though he doesn't like guns or doesn't want to associate with guns anymore, and the community's response to the fire. You also have Atticus and the court case, the case that he's been appointed to defend Tom Robinson. And it's his duty to do so, even though he knows this is going to cause a lot of grief for him and his family. But it's his job as a person. And you also have Atticus. You see Atticus's duty towards himself. The fact that he says before he can live with other people, he has to live with his own conscience, and therefore that's why he has to see this case through. You also have appearance versus reality. You have Boo Radley. Boo is not what he appears to be. He is not this guy who goes out and eats cats, or sneaks in, or looks into people's windows at night. There's something more to him. You also have Atticus. There's more to Atticus than just being an old lawyer who can't do anything. And of course, Miss Du Bois. There's more to Miss Du Bois than meets the eye. She's not just this crazy old lady at the end of the street who yells insults at kids. So there's many, symbols in part one. The major three are the knothole, which is this symbol of communication between Boo and the children. You also have the mad dog, which is this symbol of racism, or how people act in the presence of color, of skin color. People who are racist act like they're out of their minds when confronted with ideas that perhaps they can't understand. You'll come to see this even more when you understand what Tom Robinson has been accused of. And then, of course, you have the mockingbird, which is this symbol of innocence. And people who are innocent are sometimes destroyed by knowledge, particularly knowledges of good and evil. Remember the Chinaberry trees. This awakening sometimes destroys people, and we'll see how that works in this idea, a sin to kill a mockingbird, because all they do is sing their hearts out for us. It's sin to kill innocence, or people who are innocent. There's also many, many allusions, so many that I'm not going to even go over them, but go back through your book and, mark them. The ones about Civil War and history are really important. They're there for reasons. Okay, so there's many ways to break down a novel, the structure of a novel or a structured piece of writing. I'm going to talk about three in part one, or apply to part one and the rest of the book. One is the traditional plot. Traditional plot, of course, is expedition, inciting event, rise in action, climax, fall in action, resolution. So according to traditional plot, part one is mostly exposition. It introduces us to the setting, the major characters, and the major conflict. So you have, or the ideas of the town before the major conflict comes around. It also has the inciting event in it, and the inciting event happens fairly late in this novel. It's in chapter 9, very beginning of chapter 9, when Cecil Jacob calls Atticus a nigger lover, because that really gets to the main conflict of the novel itself. And then you, of course, have rising action, and rising action in the part one includes, the fight, Christmas, and the fight with Francis, the Mad Dog, and even Mrs. Dubose. So we're still in the rising action. Climax will happen, somewhere towards the end of part, the second part. Another way to look at structure is to break it up into a three-part structure, or 3 acts. And in the three-part structure, part one here is mostly about Boo Radley. Part two is mostly about the court case. And part three is the aftermath of the court case. But the aftermath of the court case also brings back Boo Radley. And the third part, third way to look at perhaps a structure would be an episodic plot. And I told you that this was a novel that was written in a series of short stories that the author put together as a novel. So Harper Lee wrote this as a sort of a series of interconnecting short stories. Her friend, the person based on Dill, told her to, and that was Truman Capote, told her to put them into a novel, write them into a novel. And so here are some episodes that happened in this first part. One, there's Boo Radley, the episode of Boo Radley, and it includes, Dill thinking up the game, making Boo come out, Jim touching the house, the play, one man story that the kids put on, the fishing pole and the note that they try to put towards the door, the sneaking into the backyard to peek into the window, and Nathan Radley firing a shotgun, and the knot hole. So that's episode perhaps 1. Episode 2 might be Scout's first day at school. Episode 3 could be Christmas with the Uncle Jack and Francis. Episode 4, the snowman and the fire. Episode 5, Atticus or a one-shot Finch and the Mad Dog. Episode 6, Mrs. Dubose. So there's at least 6 episodes in part 1. The other thing to think about is that this is a Bildungsroman novel. It's the intellectual and moral development of a youthful character, which is Scout. There are numerous lessons that Scout learns in part 1. Besides the fact that her coming to understand what racism is, which is the major perhaps lesson of the book, and how to deal with it and how to deal with prejudiced people. Here are just a list of 13 lessons. I think I mentioned 14 in these videos, but here's 13. 1, if you want to reach people, talk about what they're interested in, not what you're interested in. And this is like Walter Cunningham at lunch. This is on page 26. 2, anyone in your house is a guest. You treat them with respect. If they want to eat up, the cloth napkin or pour syrup on their vegetables, you let them. It's on page 27. Number 3, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you walk around in their skin. Page 33. Lesson 4, you need to learn how to compromise if you want to get on in the world. And that is 34. And Scout learns that, with Atticus about her first grade teacher. Lesson 5, let people live the way they want to. Everyone has a right to their own privacy. If they want to come out of the house, let them come out of the house. If they want to stay in the house, let them stay in the house. And that's on page 54. Always stay positive, particularly things that you can't control. And this is from Mrs. Motti, page 82. Don't cuss unless you have extreme provocation, unless you're extremely provoked. This is Uncle Jack, page 90. Always listen to both sides of a conflict or an argument, page 97. That's number 8. Number 9, people in their right minds never take pride in their talents, page 112. 10, the way we conduct ourselves when the chips are down is what matters most, page 120. 11, before you can live with other people, you have to learn to live with your own conscience, page 120. 12, it's never an insult to be called what someone else thinks is a bad name, page 125. And the meaning of courage, page 128. The meaning of courage, of course, is not someone with a gun, but someone seeing something through when they know they're going to lose. It's easy to give up, but it's not so easy to actually see things through when you know everything is against you. So try to reflect on some of those lessons that Scott learns through the rest of the book. See which ones she will use, particularly during the period of the court case and the mob scenes and the aftermath of the court case. Okay, so the second part of this book, the court case, is coming up pretty quickly. We will get some, these themes that we've talked about will continue. There'll be some more allusions, particularly to the Civil War, that we'll talk about as we go through. We've met most of the main characters. There are a couple important characters that we haven't met, but when we meet them, I will point them out and talk about them briefly. And we'll see how this comes out in the end. All right, I hope that helps. I'll talk to you tomorrow about Chapter 12.